us off, you know, a couple of the audience members brought up the point that, alhamdulillah, there's an incredible theory as to how we can think about epistemology and, you know, with an Islamic lens, and then look into colonialism and the impacts of that on the ground. So the question I want to pose is if you can comment a little bit on perhaps the discrepancy between theory and practice. How can we bridge that gap? So we now maybe have a better insight into the theory, but how is it that folks who understand this theory, who may propagate this theory, still fail to practice you know, Islamic values or just any kind of behavior through an Islamic epistemological lens, in contrast to the challenges you mentioned?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, 2 points about that. Number one, coloniality. That's why I spend so much time with coloniality, because coloniality is a very hegemonic, it's a very selfish impulse, right? So it seeks to describe everything else as subhuman. It subhumanizes all other types of knowledge. So it's difficult for us to recognize that part of our humanity and still feel comfortable in a space that encourages you not to. And then the second thing is that I would argue that it is an embodied knowledge, actually. It's just not recognized as such. Is that clear? When I say it's an embodied knowledge, what I'm trying to say is that I don't think that the bridge between theory and practice is as deep as some people think it is. Rather, I think that people who are actually living this out, this embodied knowledge out, don't recognize that, hold on a second, I learned that from my uncle, and in fact, I didn't learn that from anybody. I just saw everybody at my house doing that. That's an embodied knowledge, right? It changes the epistemological stances of people in that regard.
And I mean, with that you know, concept, if you can comment a little bit on the alternative.
Right.
Then what, you know, what would be the Islamically based alternative to that?
Right. Islamic-based alternative to what?
So you're mentioning the challenges of you know, coloniality, how that's entrenched within our minds, and how you mentioned it's the colonial influences or presence that kind of propagates it, right? So what do you view to be an alternative that aligns with our values, or that moves away from that kind of thinking?
I'm still not sure. Who wrote that? I'm still not sure I understand the question. So what I'm trying to, one of the things that I'm saying is that our Islamic practice is what it is. The Sharia is debated, it's articulated among scholars. That I think, you know, we're safe with that. We've been writing books about that for centuries. What we haven't used in this kind of context is the knowledge that we already have with us. So there are ways to dig that out of Muslim communities. It could happen through research. It could happen by putting contrasting epistemologies in the same space and having them debate, push. You know, I don't have a problem with the cultural practices and the ancestral knowledge you come with. I know you've been told it's bad. We're saying that it's good. But what we're saying is that recognize that it's your ancestral knowledge, and don't try to put it into the space like it's the Islamic knowledge approach. So I actually separate ancestral knowledge and Islamic. I mean, ancestral knowledge can be influenced by Islamic traditions, of course, but I do draw a distinction, though. There is a distinction between ancestral knowledge and Islamic knowledge, right? There are several distinctions between those two.
And with that, you know, understanding, maybe if you can comment a little bit on the attack on tradition, if you will. You touched on this earlier, and of course the importance of that in our tradition, with Sunnah and the corpus that we have, that we draw from in Islamic tradition. If you can comment a little bit on how that's been, under attack, or
ancestral knowledge,
appropriate responses to that would be.
Absolutely.
So the concept that is most useful in answering this question is the concept of modernity. So you have all of these kind of discourses that describe people as subhuman. What happened is that in 1552 there was a debate about how Spanish were treating the people here in this country, actually, that we sit in, between De La Casa and Sobreveda, called the Valladolid debates. I won't go too far into it. But they debated about the nature of men, okay? And there were two lines of argument in this debate. On the one hand, the debate, Sobreveda, lodged an argument that, no, these people, they're subhuman because they don't have a religion. If you don't have a religion, you don't have a God. If you don't have a God, you don't have a soul. On the other side of the debate, De La Casas, they were arguing essentially that no, they are actually humans. They're just savages. We need to desavagize them. So this line, right, the desavagizing line, that no, they're savages, really took very colorful forms. And I gave you 3 examples about how people in the Orient are described, like Arabs and Pakistanis, right? But this knowledge that was depicted in this kind of subhuman way actually had tremendous value with it. And so that's what I'm saying. And by the way, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there are many examples of the Prophet, or Allah himself in the Quran said, look, just do what is ma'ruf, until, you know, abusive practices set in. But, you know, in many instances, all of the cultural practices that the Quraysh and the people of Al-Madinah were doing, the Prophet confirmed that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself confirmed all of those practices. So it's not, ancestral knowledge is not a problem for us Islamically, but we believe it is because we're colonial subjects. We don't see ourselves as colonial agents, but we are. We live here, we work here, we've been impacted, it's invisible to us, right? And so we have to kind of recognize how modernity caused us to see our people back home. I'm from America, I'm not from back home, but most of the people here are. But so how it caused us to see them, and African Americans here, in a particular light. This was by design. This is the purpose of modernity. It is intended to make us see ourselves in a subhumanizing type way, and to embrace these kind of notions of, in fact, when you hear young people in the mosque talking about older people in the mosque, it's almost, if you had put the person in the brown paper bag and let them speak and did one of those kind of voiceovers where you can't tell the kind of voice the person is speaking, you would think you're talking to like an old world colonist, but it's really not. It's a young Muslim describing their parents and their uncles, right? So in other words, we have to reclaim those things that we saw as negative, but with 2 conditions, as I said. Understanding that it is culturally specific on the one hand, and it's not Islamic, because that, you know, white supremacy we recognize. We don't recognize how we mimic white supremacy in our own unique spaces. So one condition is that you can bring your ancestral knowledge, but it's your ancestral knowledge, and it may be useful for us. It might be good, but it's your knowledge. And we need to be clear that you're not going to replace white folks for us, okay? We need to be very clear about that. And so let me stop.
And for the young Muslim in the audience who's coming to hear an academic perspective and hopefully take a spiritual benefit from it, you know, you touched on the differences that exist between the Islamic perspective and others. What do you think is that connection, or that how can a young Muslim in this audience gain further clarity and connect that to their practice, given the larger theoretical conversation that we're having?
Yeah. Good question. How they can connect it to their practice? So we're talking about spirituality. So the Prophet ﷺ, as I reflect on his life, he left Mecca because what? Well, they were trying to kill him. But aside from that, he couldn't practice his Islam. It was a very religiously oppressive environment. So we actually, in my opinion, have to disentangle, have to separate out the things in this society. We have to identify the things in this society that are causing us to be silent about oppression, to replicate and reproduce oppression. It's ordered by us in the Quran. You want to talk about spirituality? This is an order in the Quran. We can go through all the verses in the Quran that require us to stand for justice. Why? It's difficult for us to practice our faith without that. And if we can't even identify, we can't even recognize the most virulent forms of oppression that we face, all we can do is go to immigration marches or Islamophobic marches, and we think that we're doing our part, like a tweet that Sheikh Omar Suleiman sends out, or something like that. And we think we've done our part when it comes to this whole notion of social justice. Well, there's a very real reason for us to get serious about it, and the real reason is that we're not going to be able to really express our faith fully in this place until we learn how to navigate these systems of coloniality that I've talked about. Now, how do you do that? So Islamic knowledge gives us very broad concepts about ways to do that, but unique, specific, tangible ways of doing that, I argue, can come from ancestral knowledge. Okay? So there is a spiritual reason for doing this kind of thing too. Where else are you going to get? Look, you want us to have the people in this country listen to us when we say that Muslims are being oppressed, right? And Muslims have not addressed the achievement gap in any supplemental way. I mean, that costs billions of dollars for the poorest, the poorest people in this country. Muslims don't have anything for those people. We ain't got nothing for. There are some Muslims that have stood up when people have gotten shot by police. But many forms of oppression that exist in this country, Muslims are silent. And then you want somebody to turn around and listen to you when it comes to Islamophobia? Why would anyone want to do that? And they won't. Because why? Because we don't like hypocrisy. We don't like double standards. And so I might roll with you at the beginning and rock the Palestinian flag and BDS, but after 5 or 10 years, it's like, hold on a second. Are we partners or not? Right? And so, so one of the things that ancestral knowledge, in my humble opinion, gives us is ways around that. Ways to directly engage our society without any filters, okay? And Islam has always been allowed, I don't see any Sharia restrictions to what I'm talking about at all. But even if there were, Islam has always had a bit of leverage and leeway, especially for Islam in new places on the face of the planet. It has allowed you to make mistakes, and then we correct as we get deeper along our journey, right? We correct things. You want to start from the tradition at the very beginning. Brother walks in the masjid, he's praying 5 prayers in the second day. I mean, hold on a second. I mean, we're new in this country, right? So ancestral knowledge allows us to situate Islam and our Islamic practice a lot better than what we've actually demonstrated in this country, right? Because as I talked about, there's a couple of extremes. Either you're straight tradition, you're straight deeply into Islam, or you're the opposite. You're black, straight, Black Lives Matter, barely back to Islam. All right, here's a middle path.
Jazakallah khair. And unfortunately, despite quite the number of audience questions, we will have to conclude with this one because Maghrib is going to be, the Jama'ah will be very soon. So a lot of these questions touched on identity politics. So you were just mentioning allying ourselves with certain causes, making sure we stand up for justice fully and absolutely, and not just selectively. So how does ancestral knowledge? Are there examples we can draw from? How does it inform our understanding, our positionality within our identities relative to other groups? And what's where are the pitfalls potentially too, in how we kind of self-segregate ourselves or identify ourselves differently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of what you're asking about is going to have to just be taken up by us as we kind of put fires out as we go along the way. Ancestral knowledge, I do think, can give us some things, and other things it cannot. I can learn from Fannie Lou Hamer. I can learn from Malcolm X. These are people I can learn from. But Malcolm X wasn't talking about the school-to-prison pipeline. That's my guy, right? Malcolm X, that's my guy. May Allah have mercy on him. Nothing that he said can help me deal with the achievement gap, can help me deal with how police brutality happens in this day and age. At that time, it happened very differently than what is happening now, right? So when it comes to ancestral knowledge, it does have limitations in the sense that it's not going to give us everything we need to navigate in this space, but it will give us some of the wisdom and some of the historical practices that allow people like our parents and their parents to kind of exist and with as much dignity as possible. So yeah, I'm not sure that ancestral knowledge can really help us with how we have to continue to redefine ourselves, because we have to understand one of the reasons that it doesn't work is that oppression is never static. It never hits us in the same way. We get oppressed in a way, a law is passed. Well, oppression happens because some people benefit, right? Do you think that people who benefit from oppression, when you pass a law to stop them from their privilege, that they give up? No. They reshift, they retool, we're fighting them over here, and they're hitting us from where? Behind. So ancestral knowledge is embodied, it's intergenerational. In other words, the hell I'm catching as a young black man in America might be equally beneficial to my dad and to my great uncle as their knowledge is to me. It's an intergenerational embodied conversation that in 10 years from now, my sons will have to kind of say, oh hey man, I thought you was with this. You told me you listen to hip hop. What you talking about ain't relevant no more, Pops. You know, because it is an embodied, intergenerational, ever-changing body of knowledge that nobody has the complete control to dictate what it means.